Okay.
Very good. So, some of you same faces as last week, some of you different, but basically we've got business admin and pre-health science and your pre-health science, great. Anybody, any other courses? No, none of my students actually showed up, so there you go. All right, well, today, so good to see you back, and hopefully we'll get a bit of an understanding of the APA referencing today. So our goals are to really develop a bit of an understanding about what APA referencing is, why we use APA referencing, and what sort of, how do we do the formatting, and just a little bit about the fact that Word does have a function for setting up the APA referencing and making your own reference list through that. So we'll talk about that as well. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Can you see? Is that all right? And you've all got a copy of all the handouts? Okay. So what do you guys think referencing is all about?
Where you got your information from.
Good, yeah, just letting people know where that information has come from. So last week we talked about, was it last week? Yeah. That was ages ago, eh? Easter just throws a spanner in the works. Last week we talked about the fact that when you're writing an essay, it's about collating a lot of information from a lot of different sources and using that information as sort of evidence to put across your story and your perspective in your essay. So when you're doing that, essentially referencing is basically a standardised way of acknowledging where you've got that information from. Even if it's not a direct quote, okay? Even if it's just some information and you've summarised it in your own words, we still need to use what's called a reference, okay? So, and this helps us to avoid this concept of plagiarism, which you may have read about in your student handbook or your program handbook or wherever, but basically plagiarism is copying or using somebody else's ideas and representing them as if they were your own. So I've got a short video around plagiarism because essentially that's what we're trying to avoid. So just bear with me for a moment.
Even if you have no intention of plagiarizing, you may unwittingly plagiarize a research paper. This is called accidental plagiarism, and it could happen to you if you've not mastered publication ethics. This video presents 5 basic tips to avoid accidental plagiarism. Acknowledge the work of others. Are you sure you have acknowledged all relevant past works in your reference list? Past works include ideas, concepts, findings, methods, and even minor elements of research papers you've discussed in your paper. Forgetting to cite even a single source, minor or major, is considered as plagiarism. This applies to your own past works as well. Cite all past works that have helped you in doing your research or writing your paper. Clearly indicate which parts of your paper contain your original ideas and which are based on past works. Seatbelts help you drive safely. Quotation marks can help you write safely. In some fields of research, especially in the humanities, you can quote phrases from another author's work verbatim. In such cases, always use quotation marks and cite the author clearly. But remember that quotes are rarely used in scientific research papers. Paraphrase correctly. In scientific writing, you cannot usually use quotes. You need to paraphrase and summarize the writing of other authors. But watch out! Only changing a few words here and there is also considered plagiarism. To paraphrase, understand the meaning of the original piece of writing. Then use your own words to express that meaning and be careful to prevent any changes in the meaning. Of course, remember to cite the original paper. If you are not confident of paraphrasing, seek help from your co-authors or English-speaking colleagues. Take notes carefully. Be careful while taking notes. When you refer to your notes at a later point, you might not remember if something you've written in your notebook contains your own words or if it's an exact quotation from another paper. When taking notes, understand the meaning and express what you have understood in your own words. Try to not copy. If you must copy something, use quotation marks to indicate to yourself that these words are not yours. Also, do not forget to include references in your notes to exact quotes as well as to parts you have paraphrased or summarized. Acknowledge common scientific knowledge. You might think that common scientific facts don't need citations. But if you're a beginner at scientific writing, try to be on the safe side and provide references as far as possible. Avoid accidental plagiarism.
Okay, so that was just a wee introduction to the key ideas there. Any questions from that video? Right. So, I mean, one of the issues it raised in there was that simply taking some of the work that you've been reading and changing a few minor words and then writing it down is still plagiarism. That's not sufficient to avoid that plagiarism concept, okay? So what we're really working towards here is developing your writing skills so that you can actually read the information that's out there, understand that information and write it in your own words. That's what paraphrasing really is. Okay, so there is a bit of an art to that. And that just takes a bit of practice, essentially. Okay. So when the title of today's session is actually APA referencing. So there are different methods for referencing the sources of information that you use. Commonly, there's also the Harvard Business Method, which is like the one that they used in that video, where you use sort of numbers throughout the text and then the citations at the bottom of the page. APA referencing, does anybody know what APA stands for?
American Psychological Association.
Very good. Yes.
Did
you read it on my notes?
Yeah.
Well done. There we go. You're one step ahead of me. It stands for the American Psychological Association, and it continuously evolves, and they develop new sort of ways of doing it. And so we're currently up to the 6th edition of the American Psychological Association format for referencing. Okay, it is a commonly used one throughout academic writing. Even though it's psychological, it's also used in other discipline areas as well, and it's widely accepted across New Zealand institutions for academic writing that we use APA formatting. So it basically is just providing us with a set of rules for how to do this whole referencing thing and make sure we avoid the plagiarism. Alright. So when do we need to reference? Like the video said, basically when you need to reference any ideas that aren't your own original ideas. Whenever you quote something directly, you need to reference it. And whenever you paraphrase or summarise the ideas of somebody else, you need to reference it. So we are really trying to cover all bases here. And it's quite, when you look at it that way, there's a lot of, it's quite hard to have an original idea. You know, most of the ideas that we come up with, you've probably read about them somewhere, you've seen something written about it somewhere else, and there's probably a lot of literature behind the ideas that you think might be commonly held. So it's always worth, I guess, if you think you've got an idea, it's starting to do some reading around that and see where some of the key themes and principles may have come from. See what research actually is available that supports that idea. There are two key parts to referencing. There's the in-text citation. So we are basically writing it into the text as we go. And we used the examples last week for the vaccination, writing the essay with the paragraph, you know, the introduction sentence, the evidence sentence, and then the closing sentence. So we use this example, but this is an example of using an in-text citation. Phipp and Sims 2008 note that due to contradictory research, vaccines have developed a bad reputation with parents. Okay, so the bad reputation is a direct quote, the rest of it is paraphrased. Because there's a direct quote in there, we have to include the page number. But we also have to acknowledge in the text that that idea has come from these people's research or their work. Does that make sense? There's lots of actually different ways of writing that too. Can you think of any other ways of writing that? You could say there's contradictory research around the vaccinations, and some parents, are unsupportive or dubious about using vaccinations with their children. And then in brackets afterwards, Phipps and Sims 2008. Okay, so we'll look at a few different ways of doing that in-text citation in a moment, but again, there's a bit of an art to writing it in different ways and showing that you can use the information from these other sources in sort of creative ways in your writing. So there's the in-text citation, and then there's the reference list at the end of your paper. Now, unfortunately, the reference list doesn't usually count in your word count. Okay, so don't get your hopes up there, because the reference list can be quite long if you've used a lot of different sources. Does anybody know the difference between a reference list and a bibliography? A bibliography, I think I mentioned it last week, so you guys should know if you were here. A bibliography tells you a complete list of all of the things that you've read and looked at in the course of your research towards writing this piece of work.
So is that even if you've not quoted it?
Even if you haven't quoted it or paraphrased it or referenced it in your text. A reference list just gives you the list of the things that you've referenced or cited throughout the text. Okay? So that's really important when you're going through your, like sometimes when you're writing and you we talked about proofreading and the fact that you have to edit and take bits out and cut bits back in, change things up. Sometimes you might decide actually to reduce my word count, I need to cut that paragraph out, but then you forget to cut it out of your reference list at the end of your essay. Okay, so that would be then when your marker goes to look at your reference list, they'll go, well, where's this one? You haven't actually cited them in the text. So that's where it's quite tricky. You've got to keep on checking and making sure that you are keeping the list at the end of your essay up to date with what's actually in your text. And the other useful trick that they talked about in that little video is writing down the references, the sources of information as you're taking notes in your preparation stage. If we simply read things and then later on you're not sure where you've got that idea from, but you want to use it in your essay, it can be quite a time-consuming process to go back and try and find the article that you actually got it from. Okay, so if you're just when you're taking notes and studying, and keep a sideline of where you got that particular piece from. Make sense? So you can see there's a specific format here for how that information ends up in your reference list. So what's in this in-text citation is essentially an abbreviation. It tells you who the author is, and then when you go to the reference list, you should be able to find that's the name of the article, the long-term implications of anti-vaccine campaigns. I just made this up, by the way, it's not actually real. But then that means you should be able to go and try and find that article and read it and see if that person has referenced it correctly. And that's the point of it as well, so you can actually go and look up this information. I've read academic articles that summarise research, and then you go and look at that research and they haven't actually summarised, they haven't paraphrased very well, they haven't summarised it properly, and they've kind of changed the key idea. And they're like, to support their own argument. Okay? So, if there's, to keep your work honourable, you need to be true to the real purpose and intention of the writing that you are paraphrasing or summarising, and not change the meaning. Any questions? Westport questions? There's a whole group up there on Westport, by the way. Alright. So, paraphrasing is essentially that idea of rewriting the ideas in your own words without changing the meaning. It's much better to use the paraphrasing than direct quotes, because if we fill our essay up with direct quotes, then we're not really showing that we've understood what we've read. Okay, we're showing that we can cut and paste, but you're not actually showing that you've understood it. With paraphrasing, you're really proving that I read this is my understanding of what they've said, and I'm going to phrase it in this particular way. Okay? So it shows that you've read it and understood it. So for example, there's two different ways there of paraphrasing the same information. You need to evaluate your information sources and choose the most useful ones. This evaluation is ongoing throughout the research process. That idea has come from Perrin in 2004. Or you could say Perrin, 2004, believes students need to evaluate their information sources and choose the most useful ones. Two completely different ways of paraphrasing the information. Then the direct quote would be, Perrin 2004 noted that students need to evaluate their information sources and choose the most useful ones. That's the direct quote. And so that's where you put it in direct quotation marks. And we tend to just use direct quotes to really emphasise a key point, or to say this is a real expert opinion at this point. And it's usually short. We don't direct quote a whole paragraph. Okay? We just take a key sentence or a key statement from within a sentence and direct quote that. Is this all new to you guys, or is
So
it?
that sort of tells them that obviously it has to read that whole paragraph.
Yeah.
So it's sort of just giving them the link to the
Yeah.
paragraph.
It's giving a bit of a, this is where this idea has come from, and this is the expert who says this. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, is this something you guys have covered before at all, or is it all new?
High school.
Did a little bit in high school?
Yeah.
Cool, good.
Yeah.
You guys pre-house science? New? Yeah. Yeah. Again, the more you practice at it, the better you're going to get. We don't expect you to be perfect straight off the mark in your first essay. But we do expect that you have a go at it and keep learning from the process, I guess.
Well, the moment you do later
So where are we getting this information from? There are lots of different sources, potential sources of information. And this is what makes APA referencing quite complicated, is that every different type of source of information has a slightly different style for how you write it in your reference list. Okay. So So we can use books. So we can go to the library, get out some books. Has everybody been to our library and got something out? Had a go? Had a look?
Yeah, I've had a look, I haven't got anything.
You just need your student ID number to get a book out from our library. If there's a book you want and we don't have it in our library, they can actually access it from other libraries, so ask them. There's also journals and periodicals. So journals are usually a compilation of articles that are written on a particular topic. So that, journal might be, for example, employment relations journal, or a behavioural science journal, or that journal of health and science, something like that. So you usually focus on a particular key topic. Academics do their research, they get their information peer reviewed. That means that a group of their colleagues and peers look through their information and assure that it is scientifically valid, that it's followed appropriate methodology, and that the findings reflect, the work that they've actually done. So peer-reviewed information is usually much more reliable than anything that you're necessarily going to find just by Googling. And we talked about, I think last week, the perils of Google is that anybody can put anything up on Google. It's not checked necessarily to make sure that it's fact. Okay? So we do have to be a little bit cautious of where we get, because you can find arguments for vaccination and arguments against vaccination, but which is the right one? How do we know, right? Okay? And that's where, if we're looking at journals and periodicals, we're looking at peer-reviewed articles, research that's actually being conducted with valid sort of conclusions. They might still have contradictory conclusions, but that's also part of the process. Okay? They've got some evidence rather than just an opinion. We can use web pages in saying that. And there is a lot of good stuff out there. And if you've used Google Scholar before, I don't know if you've heard of Google Scholar. When you're in Google, type in Google Scholar and it will bring up a whole new search engine basically. And instead of searching the general web, you're going to be searching scholarly articles, academic articles. You brought it up there, have you? Did you find it?
What?
Have you brought it up on your computer?
Oh, it's just a
Just do
forward.
So yeah, Google Scholar anyway, you can get a whole lot of different relevant pieces of information on your topic. The problem with that is you'll often come up with articles that you then have to pay to look at. And you're like, I don't want to pay to look at that, I don't want to pay to read it. It looks really relevant and interesting to my work, but I don't want to pay to read it. And that's where our library is really useful. You can actually access a whole lot of those paid articles through our library. We pay for you guys to have access, essentially.
How do you access that?
How do you get access to that? We look at our handout here on searching for information on World Cat Discovery. And I've got a link here. Your World Cat access is the same as your computer login with your password, the password that you've got set up for your computer access here at Polytech. And it will look a little bit like that when you come up, when it opens up. So you could just type in anything in there, or you can go to advanced search. So if you know a little bit more about what you're looking for, so is there a particular topic you might be interested in searching? Cats. That's quite broad. Should we look at our vaccine theme, vaccinations? So you can look up, see if I can type. Vaccinations. There we go. Keyword. And you could add another keyword. You could add in the title of the book or the thing that you're looking for, or the author if you know specifically who you're looking for. And down the side there it tells you which databases you're searching, academic one file, master file, complete, not that that matters, but the more sources that you're searching, the more pieces of information you're going to come up with. And then down the side here, it's got type of Tūne Polytech library, so that's come up with initially things that we hold or have direct access to. But if you want to search the libraries worldwide, you can do that too. Because like I said, if we haven't necessarily got it, we may be able to find it for you. And sometimes when you look on here, it will give you the PDFs articles, so you can get into that. So there you go, there's a whole book. We've got an e-book. You can access that. Immunisation safety review, vaccinations. So searching the WorldCat is quite useful. The other thing to bear in mind with searching WorldCat is thinking about the currency of the information that you're using. We're in 2018, I think. I don't know how that happened, but 2018. So if we are referencing a source from 1998, you know, it's 20 years old. There's been 20 more years of research. Okay?
I thought it was like 10 years ago.
I know, it feels like only 10 years ago.
I'm looking at someone's face 10 years ago, I'm like, oh, so like 1990 like something.
Yeah, 1990 something, yeah.
I was born in
The information is probably redundant, like research moves pretty fast in a lot of areas. There'll always be some sort of seminal articles that are relevant in a particular field. Like, for example, in industrial psychology, there's an article from 1998, which is a meta-analysis, which is still referenced today because it was such an extensive piece of work, you know, and it was so relevant to that field. And a meta-analysis basically takes all the little pieces of research and summarizes them into one big piece of research to see what the key theme is. And if there's any conclusive, you know how I said that sometimes research can be contradictory? The meta-analysis takes all the research and tries to find if there's an overarching commonality or theme there. So something like a really extensive meta-analysis from 20 years ago may still be relevant. But you can actually search in WorldCat based on the last 5 years. I want to only know research from the last 5 years or from the last 10 years. Your tutors, when they mark essays, will look to see that the information you use is current as well as relevant. Okay, so we'll look at the currency of it in the essays. Any questions? You can search all topics, you can change the field of topics, you want to just look at medicine, you want to just look at English. There is a bit of an art to searching, to finding the things that are really relevant to what the topic you're might be doing an essay on. So that's where adding more keywords might be quite useful, like just typing in vaccinations is too broad. Vaccinations in what context? For what purpose? People or animals, or what are we talking about there? So you type in multiple different things to give you a bit more information. And failing that, if you're really struggling with the search tool, go and see our librarians. They love searching up articles. Okay? They will be able to help you. That's their forte, is finding some elusive article that might be the perfect thing that you need to finish your essay. Oops. Any questions about WorldCat? That handout tells you how to go about it, gives you your instructions step by step, what to look for, how to open, it sometimes comes up with a PDF full text. Sometimes it's an ebook, lots of different sources, but hopefully you can find some information that's relevant. And that's where we're heading. We don't just have books in the library anymore because the books date too much. The information is out there, it's available online, and those journals and so forth. We're going to time. Should keep moving.
Does that clock right?
No.
No,
What does it say?
No, that clock's not right. It's an hour
Yeah.
out, obviously, but like savings.
When I first came in, I was like, it's 3 already, I need to go.
Yeah. It's 2:10. That's fine. So, the referencing format in your reference list, like I mentioned, there's slightly different approaches depending on the source of information. And that's where this Typos New Polytech Library Guide, APA referencing, is going to be your toolkit. There are there are plenty of other guides out there. You can get them from any university or web page will have guides for those sorts of things. But what's the difference between how I reference a book versus how I reference a journal versus a web page? And they are quite fussy about the format. Like the italics are there for a reason in that first one. The italics tell us that that's the title of the book. The Road to Social Work and Human Service Practice and Introductory Text. That's the title of the book is in italics. Whereas when you go to a journal, it's the title of the journal that's in italics. The title of the article is not italicized. You remember last week I said you used to get marks off if your full stops are in the wrong place. Where the full stops are is important to some people, okay? That's how it is. That's the APA format. The full stops are there for a reason, the commas are there for a reason. It's about getting that format right. So we start with the authors of the book or the journal or the article, their surname, their first name is simply abbreviated. If there's multiple authors, we list all of them in the reference list. The year, the title, and then where it's published, so we place of publication, and then the name of the publisher, Thompson. Okay.
Does it have like page number or anything?
No, not for that, because it's come from the whole book. So in text citation, if you've used a quote, you'll put the page number where the quote came from. In the journal, they do include the page numbers because they're saying actually it's only from this one article within this journal. And so the pages of that are 166 to 172. Oh God. And if you've retrieved it online, you need to say where you've retrieved it from. So for example, there's the layout, author, date, article title, journal title, volume of the journal, issue number of the journal, pages, and then maybe a locator information if you've got that as well. And then a web document, like say if you've just got something off the web, and there are some good sources like Statistics New Zealand, Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, Ministry of Health. There might be sources there that are some government publications that you want to be able to reference as well. And they're usually online. So again, and there may not be a specific name for the author, so you have to put the name of the company who's published the article. So it might be or the Ministry of whoever. Ministry of Health, 2010, Māori Public Health Perspective. Retrieved, so when it's retrieved from the internet, retrieved February 15th, 2010 from Public Health Workforce Development website, and then you put the HTML, the web address in there.
So you just don't put the website, it's not just the website, it's all like the whole.
Yeah, the whole link.
Yeah.
Yeah, so your lecturer should be able to click on that link and go straight to your source and check that you haven't copied it verbatim. Lecturers do check those sorts of things. And we also have tools like plagiarism checkers, Turnitin and so forth, that basically electronically scan your writing and compare it to everything that's out there on the web and tell us if there's any direct match between what you guys have written and what.
There will be if it's a direct quote.
If there's a direct quote, there will be, yep. Yep, but that's okay. Usually, yeah, there's they'll pick it up and then they'll bring up the bits, the sections that are of concern, and you can check those.
So like, can we use it? Just like,
You can use plagiarism checkers. You can find free plagiarism checkers online. Yeah.
yeah, just so we can, like, check it out.
Some courses will get you to submit your work through Turnitin, and the Turnitin, I don't know if it gives you the ability to check it before you submit. It might do, which is always a useful option. But ideally, you're avoiding the plagiarism altogether by summarising and paraphrasing nicely in your own words and not.
I know, but you don't want to accidentally do it.
You might accidentally do it. Yeah, that's right. It can happen accidentally as well. Like, so I've given three basic ones: the book, the journal article, the web document. They're probably the most likely sources, but there are heaps of actual other ones that you could come across, and so like conference papers or TV films, brochures, all sorts of things. So make sure you refer back to the handout to check the format for the thing that you're trying to include in your reference list. And that document also gives you some good in-text citation options. Page 8 and 9 gives you some options for how to quote, how to paraphrase, how to use different approaches so that your writing is more varied and interesting. And in that reference list, it should be in alphabetical order. Okay, so just make sure that they're all from the author's name, alphabetical order. We always indent the second line, called a hanging indent. So examples on page 3 of that handout, you can see like Nielsen has got indented, Stewart is indented. The second line is already always indented. And just including all of the sources that you've referred to in your text. Questions about the reference list? Is there an example reference list in there? Yeah, no. I think at the very back there, yeah, that's right. At the very back there of your handout, page 9, it's got sample in-text referencing and reference list. So it gives you a bit of a, half a page of what some of your essay might look like with your in-text citations. And then the next page, it's got what your reference list might actually look like for that. So check that. Any questions? Now I mentioned at the start, and I've given you a handout on creating your reference list using Word 2007 or whatever Word you've got these days. This is possible, but I never learned to do it, okay, because it wasn't around when I was doing my papers, right? So I always say you're actually better off learning how to do it manually, because then you know how to check if it's right or not. The problem with using something like Word to create a reference list for you is when Word doesn't get it right and you can't tell the difference. Does that make sense? Or if you put the information into Word incorrectly and you can't tell the difference. If you really want to outsmart me, that's fine, go ahead, there's the handout. You should all be able to follow that. Have a look at Word. I'll show you briefly. Your business admin students probably will have a bit of an advantage when it comes to this over people like me, my little limited computing. If Word wants to open. Okay, under the references tab in the top ribbon there, it has a section there which you may have seen before. You may have just gone, I don't know what that is, I'm going to ignore it. And you can actually manage all of your sources in there, and you can also change the style of referencing format you want to use. So I mentioned Harvard and APA, but there are a lot of other options there. But we leave it on APA. You can add new sources into that list. See, I'm lost already. Insert a citation, add a source, add it into the text where it's supposed to go. Go ahead, figure that out, work out how to do it from that handout, but I would always prefer to actually go through and do it manually, because then you know that you've done it right in the first place. And you know the purpose of it as well. Yeah, any questions about that? Ultimately, there's quite a lot to it, there's quite a lot to learn, and it can be a little bit tricky, but it's, like I said, having a go, and your tutors want to see that you're having a go at it and attempting to practice the in-text citations, and definitely using a reference list at the end of your essay whenever you're having to use other sources of information. Okay, and it is how we can avoid plagiarism. A lot of this information has come from the ARA website, so I referred you to that last week. Go and have a look. They've also got similar learning resources available for APA referencing. They've got a learning pathway there as well. Okay. But essentially, yeah, you're going to have a go and try it. Questions? Anything else you really want to know before we finish? Think you've got a better idea of what's required?
Yeah.
Please don't be overwhelmed by it. Just follow the guides that are put out there. I don't get it perfect, you know. I've been doing APA referencing for many, many years, and I still have to refer back to the handouts to make sure I've got it right. Okay, so don't expect yourselves to get it right straight off.
I think with all this, like, it pretty much covers everything.
It does, yeah, exactly. And with some of this stuff, you might go, I don't need it right now, but you might need it in a year or two time. So keep it somewhere where you can actually get access to it when you do find that you need it, okay? And hopefully once you start writing your essays is when it's going to become really apparent what you need to do. Questions from Westport?
We have 0 questions.
0 questions. Okie dokie. All right. Well, if that's it, then that's it. Thanks for coming along. If you missed out on last week's handouts, let me know, and I've got a copy of those here as well.
Oh, I'll need.
You'll need some of those?
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Okay. Very good. I'll put all of this up on Moodle, and I'll give you guys access to the Moodle so you can go back and access all of the information that we've looked at, including the PowerPoints and task video on Moodle, so you can review it if you need to. Very good. Well done. Thank you for coming along. See you.
Thank you.
Okay.